Hello and welcome to In the Mix, the podcast all about the Great British Bake Off, and we're back for a brand new series for season 12 of the Bake Off, and I'm very excited to be joined by another Bake Off fanatic, JP. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello. I'm so excited that the Bake Off is back. It kind of takes over my life every sort of August, September time. But I love it. It is so much fun. But I was a little bit shocked by the introduction to this week's episode. Were you?
We've been waiting months for Bake Off to come back, and we are greeted by 4 mullets. Or 3 mullets and Prue Leaf. What on earth? It was like a bad cake dream.
It was. You've had the sugar rush, and then you've dreamt this up somehow. And yeah, actually, to be honest, I wouldn't have been able to dream this up. This was that bad. If you didn't see it, okay, why listen to this podcast? Go watch it and then come back. But if you didn't see it, or you've forgotten, too much cake, something like that, you're right. It was mullets. It was them doing an achy breaky heart type cover that they'd spun to include the word muffin and tart and things. But Paul Hollywood, I mean, he is sort of a serious baker, but then for this, he ended up looking like someone's creepy uncle in like a fringe cowboy jacket.
The thing that scared me the most is that I think Paul scarily suited it. Like Matt Lucas, you could tell he just had a costume on. Paul somehow sort of rocked the mullet, and Noel just looked like Noel, because I could totally imagine Noel rocking that on a Friday night.
Absolutely. Noel didn't look any different to what he probably usually looks like in the tent. But Paul, he did assume a new personality in a way. Maybe he wanted to be a rock star at some point in his life, and then this was the moment that it absolutely came true. But I was just thinking, because they've been previewing as well, the fact that the Bake Off is going to be on Netflix for international viewers in the US, and I just thought, they watch this for like a quaint British, oh, look, everyone making jam tarts and drinking tea, isn't it fun? But they're going to see this terrible parody of a song at the beginning and think, God, Britain is weird.
Mary Berry would never have done that. Can you imagine Beza rocking out with a mullet? No. Mary
Berry does shows with the royals at Christmas. She helps William and Kate make a fruitcake.
It was just the weirdest start, and so literally we've been waiting months for this to come back, and I can imagine there was millions of people sat down on their sofas to sit and watch it, and you're all ready for it, and you're like, yes. And then that comes out, and you're like, what have they done to Bake Off? Insane.
It was insane. And what I couldn't work out, was the song actually covered by Matt Lucas? Because it sounded like one of his Thank You Baked Potato songs that I'm not really interested in. Was it Matt Lucas singing?
I think it might have been. I had the same thing. Because obviously Paul starts off, and I was like, that can't be Paul Hollywood singing. Well, surely he can't be singing that one. And then as sort of it went through, I was like, okay, the miming's pretty good. And then when Matt Lucas did his bit, I was like, oh no, that actually does sound a little bit like Matt Lucas. It's quite scary. It probably was. And it made me laugh because it reminded me of last year's opening for the first episode, where we had Matt Lucas as Boris Johnson doing the whole sort of funny COVID press conference announcement sort of thing. But yeah, this year's one was just strange.
It was mad. But other than that, I thought it was good to have it back. Noel's jumpers are back. Twitter went crazy over his sort of black and pink smiley face jumper this year. Everyone wants to know where you can buy it, but I've seen apparently it's sold out, so that's going to disappoint a lot of fans.
Yeah. I thought it was quite tame for him, actually.
It was easing probably new viewers in.
True. You don't want to scare them away in episode 1. Although, and we'll talk about it later, I'm sure, when we meet the new bakers, there was a sort of knitwear war going on between Noel and one of the bakers. Not the dress that looked like the opposite, but someone else who I think has got potential for some zany knitwear this year.
Okay. I like it when they go on with zany outfits. I feel like you have to have a bit of a zany personality to go on the Bake Off in the first place. But outfits, because of Noel, they're stepping their game up, which is good.
You can't be bland on the Bake Off.
Absolutely not. So we've got 12 new bakers this year. They are all from a range of ages. The youngest is Freya at 19. She's a psychology student from North Yorkshire. And we've got Maggie on the other end of the spectrum. She's 70, the oldest member of the Bake Off tent, besides Prue. And she is from Dorset, and she's a retired midwife. Did you see any of the announcements about the people? Did you think, okay, I'm most looking forward to seeing that person in the tent before it aired?
Yeah, so when the releases came out, I think it was a week ago, 2 weeks ago now, I had a look through, and it's that thing, isn't it? When they come out every year, you don't get the personality of them. And by the end of the first episode, you know who you're rooting for, and you know who you think is going to win, and this, that, and the other. But when they come to on the press release, you're like, okay. They are an interesting bunch this year. I thought Freya obviously is going to be interesting for the fact that she is vegan. So it's the first time, as you've said before, the first exclusively vegan baker that we've had, which I think is really interesting. And from the release as well, I want to say it was Chigs. I can't remember. Who was the one who has just learnt to bake, who is our lockdown baker?
Yeah, that's Chigs.
Yeah, I think, again, we've had, as Prue said in the episode, winners who have literally just started baking. But I think for him, because it's come from lockdown and we're still sort of in that weird COVID limbo land at the moment, I quite liked the story of having a lockdown baker. Looking through the other ones, Maggie, I didn't realise that she was essentially Prue too during the photos, but during the episode that was explored a lot. But nobody else sort of jumped out at me in particular from the press releases and the photos. What about you?
I think you are just judging people on their appearance, really, which is odd when the press releases come out and the social media begins to start. But I was really looking, I think it's because they're sort of the most different looking. Giuseppe, I thought, with his big curly hair, I was looking forward to seeing how he'd be in the tent. Lizzie as well, she's got sort of darker hair and then bright orange hair too, and she was wearing some zany outfits, so I thought, oh, she's going to be good. But yeah, the most of the press and the talk before Bake Off was about Freya, because you're right, she is the first fully vegan baker that we've had, and she was doing dairy free in this one and everything, so yeah, interesting. I had a few people come up on Twitter and ask, how are they accounting for the fact that maybe vegan bakes take longer than normal baking to actually prepare and achieve. So I don't know if she's had any extra time, as if you'd have in your GCSE exams or something, but who knows?
Well, I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about other cooking shows as well, because obviously we've got a vegan baker here, and there are going to be things like this week's Technical which aren't vegan, and there was some discussion around that on social media. And I was thinking about another cooking show that I love, which I watch, Great British Menu. They do a fish course, and they've had chefs that have come through that are allergic to fish or shellfish or seafood. So yeah, it's really interesting in competitions and shows when people have sometimes just got to get on with it despite the fact they can't try and taste it. And that's one of the things that for Freya, as we go through, some of the bakes she's not going to be able to try and taste as they go, particularly with the technicals, which aren't always going to be vegan. So I think that's an interesting dynamic, and one thing that as we go through the year, I don't know how they're going to manage that and how much they're going to reference it. Maybe that's one of the things they'll keep quiet behind the scenes.
Exactly. I guess, she just wants to crack on with baking, doesn't want to become, the token sort of vegan baker. She's already had, I think, abuse on social media, so we don't want it to be sort of a big deal. I know last year there was quite a bit of trolling and abuse later on in the final episodes of the Bake Off, so maybe they'll just sort of remind us that she's doing a dairy-free, but actually not focus on it every week that she's vegan, so she's going to adapt the cake this way.
She's vegan.
So let's move on to the signature challenge this week. They had to create 12 decorative mini rolls, but the sponge type, flavour and filling was up to them, and they were given 2 hours to make. Now, I swear we've had a mini roll challenge for the signature challenge before, because I remember being underwhelmed by it at some point previously, and I swear I've discussed my absolute distaste, is that a word? Disgust for the Cadbury mini roll. They're just dull. So I was a bit surprised that we were going back with mini roll again, but we did have some good flavours. What did you think of the challenge?
Well, it made me laugh because I remembered our mini roll chat from the past, and it's unusual that they repeat it. I can also imagine people at Cadbury sitting there with a notebook and pen planning next year's special editions after this. They just sit there going, right, let's make some of these. I thought they were interesting. It was obviously that's the time when we meet the new bakers as well, and we find out a bit more. So Christelle to begin with her coconut and chai ones, which were an interesting combination, and I thought, okay, we've landed. We're not just going with normal chocolate. She started with the Nana story, the nice sob story, straight away as well. It was straight back to, we haven't seen Nan for over a year. There it is.
Yep. Got to have a lot of Nan chat in Bake Off. There's so many bits, anecdotes about nans. I think people tend to learn baking or they appreciate cakes because of their nans.
Yeah, to be fair, probably the same for me as well, actually. So I'd be going on there with my Nana story straight away. Lots of Black Forest, lots of Black Forest mini rolls, and I love this because not only do we have Black Forest mini rolls, but we have somebody from the Black Forest. Like they are the expert, and they started with him, Jürgen, great, and the German Flintstones as well, but that I'm sure is for another discussion. And then they turn around, and then there's Tom going, yes, I'm also doing Black Forest mini rolls against a man from that part of Germany. Great, brilliant.
What I didn't understand was whether the bakers decided what they were going to come up with for their mini rolls ahead of time, like ahead of them meeting Jürgen for the first time. Did they just meet him and then sort of somehow go, oh, I'm going to do Black Forest as the theme throughout one of my bakes this week? Because really, three? We had Amanda do a coffee twist on a Black Forest gatto. You're right, we had Tom do his mini rolls, cherry jam, dark and white chocolate in them, and I think was there 4? There can't have been 4. Let's just check.
Might have been. There was something cherry later on, I think.
There was. Freya did her showstopper, I think, as Black Forest. So did they just all independently think of Black Forest gatto, or did they meet Jürgen? And then when he said, oh, I'm from the Black Forest, which is probably his icebreaker on a baking show, did they then all go to sleep and wake up and think they come up with a really original idea?
It's like subliminal. We all put Black Forest in there.
Yeah.
But that's a good point, though, because I've never thought. I wonder if they also make their decisions week on week, or if at the beginning of the series they go, okay, right, these are your challenges, sorts of things. Let us know at the beginning. I've never thought of that. Like, when do they come up with their ideas? Particularly now that they're in the bubble, because obviously they do have the chance to practice, but they don't have a huge amount of chance to practice. So they're going to be cooking things at home before they come. So I'm guessing they sort of devise their recipes and everything before they come and meet each other. I guess
so. Maybe it was a weird coincidence. But we did some other good flavours as well. Giuseppe, who is slowly becoming my favourite. For me, I feel like he's, going to be one of the ones that gets up there in the final weeks. He brought out the Italian flavours and did almond and orange sponges with a ricotta cheese mixed with orange blossom water. I mean, that's, as Prue said later, very elegant, very different from sort of, I guess, what the English people would be doing. There was a lot of, we had chocolate and hazelnut as well. That was nice. Freya's obviously lemon and raspberry with lemon meringue buttercream. Chigs did his marble chocolate vanilla sponge with strawberry chantilly cream. That looked good too. So to be honest, I know I said I don't like the Cadbury mini rolls, but some of the flavours sounded okay.
They did. And Rashika also did like a carrot cake one, I think, as well.
Yes.
Which I just thought that's a really clever... I mean, basically they're mini Swiss rolls. But yeah, it was great to see the idea and the presentation of them. And as I said, I can expect 3 or 4 of these to end up in Cadbury's packets by the end of next year, if I'm honest.
Exactly. So you're right. You said earlier that this signature challenge was the chance to meet the bakers. They do that interesting bit, don't they, at the beginning before they describe their cakes. They give a little bit of a sentence about who they are and show a few clips of them at home. And Jürgen obviously outshone everybody with his little clip from home, because it was Jürgen stood there with his trombone. They said he was serenading Brighton with his wife and his son, who all, I think, play instruments. I think she was on a violin and maybe his son was following him on the trombone.
Very
but then
musical.
Then they threw in, and here's his rabbit just in the house, Humphrey. So eccentric. I love it. But I just wondered, what on earth do you think the Bake Off producers would say about you? In your one sentence sort of introduction to everyone in the country on Bake Off, what would they describe about you?
Oh, that's a good question. That should be a job interview question, shouldn't it?
I know. Or how to get into Oxford. Yeah, that's part of your Oxford interview.
But this is James. James is 30 and isn't teaching anymore and makes cakes for a living. Not because he's good at it, just because he likes cake. Literally, just bakes all the time. Although I've got to mention with Jürgen's one, it really made me laugh because it was Jürgen to begin with playing on some sort of brass instrument, and then his wife, which I'm sorry, looked like him in a wig.
Oh,
literally, I didn't even realise that the camera, like the shot had changed to
Oh, God.
to his wife. That they were in the same sort of position. They both wear glasses. It was like Jurgen had run around the corner, put a wig on, come back out, different instrument.
Maybe she couldn't make it for the filming that day, and so Jurgen had no choice but to, dress as his wife as well. Who knows?
We'll meet Jurgen's wife in the final. Yes, I'm putting him in that category already. But yeah, we'll meet Jurgen's wife in the final. It'll be like, hang on, you weren't in the VT at the beginning. It was Jurgen.
It was. We'll know. Hopefully they think people will have forgotten by the time that week 10 rolls around. But Paul did a weird thing with Jurgen, because obviously he's from the Black Forest area. Why on earth did Paul, instead of giving him a critique, just say, you're from the area, you taste it? And Jurgen just was forced to eat some of his own bake and be like, yeah, it tastes good, but I'm on the show. Give me some feedback, please.
Is this like budget cuts? Paul is only doing 2 out of every 3.
Yeah.
So he's just passing it back to the baker. I thought that was a really weird moment, but also there was part of me, despite the fact already I'd gone, I like Jurgen, I really wanted Paul just to turn around and go, no, it's awful. After Jurgen going, great.
Yeah.
Maybe he thinks that's just how we do the bake-off over here.
Maybe. Who knows?
I haven't seen the German bake-off.
I'd love to see German bake-off.
That would be good, wouldn't it?
But I think it was just a weird thing. It was if Paul sort of, he might have been nervous because Jurgen was probably, he knew more about Black Forest than Paul did. So maybe he thought, oh, so I don't say anything ridiculous and get in the Daily Mail. Jurgen, you try it and tell me. But yeah, it was very weird. It seemed a little bit, I want to say disrespectful, but that's going a bit far. That's sort of Daily Mail language. But it did seem a bit like, you've spent all this time baking and I'm not going to bother to give you any of my feelings towards it. You try it.
Yeah. Basically, he just went, yes. Prue was nice. Prue gave a couple of little bits of feedback, but yeah, Paul was just like, yes, well done. Well done, Jurgen. Great.
You did it. Well done. And you also brought up the fact that Matt Lucas sang the Flintstones to him in German, which, hilarious. That clip can just stay in my mind rent-free forever.
That's it.
But also, I want to know if Matt Lucas actually speaks German. Did he learn it for the show? And does Jurgen know what the Flintstones are? Because when Matt said, what did you think? He was very like, yeah, it was all right. Yeah, haven't heard that for a while. And called it a text, which I liked, as if it was like an academic text to study. So maybe Jurgen was just being very polite. But yeah, I don't know. That was a weird moment. We'd had two weird singing moments. He got carried away.
Yes, maybe, I don't know, Jurgen studied it for his German version of GCSE English. I don't know. But it was interesting because I did GCSE German, and so there were bits there and I was like, well, okay, that might translate to the Flintstones, sort of. But yeah, it was like, okay, interesting.
Very random, very strange. Matt might have heard that a German contestant was coming on, so decided, I'm going to say something in German, and for some reason found that online and ran with it.
He just went, I'm going to do that. Wouldn't surprise me. In fact, I might need to go now at some point and go to YouTube and try and find the German version of the Flintstones and see if there is one.
Well, I am going to ask you to recite it next time on the episode, so we'll see.
I'll get learning.
So there are a few other interesting sort of moments that came up in the first signature challenge. We had George leaving his oven door open, which I loved. You know, the tent throws people off. Lizzie as well. Paul came up and said, how come you're not, further along? And she said, well, I'm clearly just a slow person, which I loved. And then Jerzino, I don't know if I said his name right. Jerzino, is that right?
Jerzino, yeah. Jerzino. Do you know what? They kept saying it. Noel and Matt were saying it differently throughout the episode. And I was sitting there going, what?
Who? I've got to say it on my podcast.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, so Jerzino used 20 passion fruits in his bake, which seemed like odd behaviour for me. But it was probably needed, but it seemed too many passion fruits.
It did, and it made him look boring because they literally went, and here's Jerzino, he's zany, he's got 20 passion fruits. And then they went around and it was sort of like Jerzino, in his VT, he's a head of finance, he's 51, he lives in London. And it's like, right, okay, that's very different from lots of passion fruits to head of finance.
Exactly. Yeah, that was his bit of eccentricity. Maybe he saw everyone else being zany, as you say, and he was like, oh God, what can I do? Just bring too many passion fruits, that's enough.
All the passion fruits, please.
Maybe. So that what they were looking for in the signature challenge, it seemed, was for the mini rolls to have a nice swirl. They kept saying, oh, that was a very nice little swirl, an attractive swirl, and I didn't want to hear the word swirl anymore. But there was a mixture of people that just didn't seem to have any because their filling just splurged out, and other people's, they did very well, including Giuseppe. His were perfect.
They looked incredible, didn't they? And it's funny because when they do I always like the bit with the challenge, you get the sort of the slow introductions and then they start editing quickly and it's like, oh, the tension's building. And they're literally going from like a brick that looks like someone's just covered it in chocolate to something that's melting to something that looks absolutely atrocious to Giuseppe's, which look like you've bought them from some sort of, Michelin-style bakery sort of. They looked amazing.
They look so good. But then, unfortunately, if you compare those to the chocolate and hazelnut mini rolls from George, who had made them, and I think they were still quite warm when he put the filling in, so they sort of flattened, and they did just look like blobs on a tray, unfortunately. And I think Prue and Paul said they looked like pudding, not cake.
Yeah, it was. I mean, if you're going to start your bake with, oh, I forgot to close the oven door. I wasn't expecting great things from him, which is a shame because I think, he's going to be a good baker. There might be an opportunity. He did well in the technical, but that was not the best start to bake off.
Let's move on to the technical, because this week, again, a few people online were up in arms about the randomness of this choice. Prue set it, and she likes to go for a sort of an old-fashioned type bake. In this one, it seems we had Sussex pond puddings last year, and no one knew what they were.
That. Oh,
You're not over the pond puddings.
It's the soggy pudding with a lemon inside it. Literally, you sort of
the
open
whole
it up
lemon.
and it's like... Yeah, disgusting.
Yeah, it's like some sort of
bring that
operation.
up this series.
How did you know? But anyway, Prue set the challenge of a malt loaf, and they had to make homemade butter, and they were given 2 hours. Now, they made a joke saying that only under 35s eat malt loaf, and I'm going to be honest, malt loaf, what on earth is it? And I have never bought it in my life. Are you a fan of it?
Have you not? Now, see, I'm closer to 35 than you, I think. I don't remember. But,
I am nowhere near 35, thank you.
Great. I mean, neither am I either. But you're further away from 35 than I am. I quite like malt loaf, to be fair, and all of the range that the only company in the world that actually make malt loaf as well. There was a certain tweet, which I don't know, which you're going to discuss later on, that you put on Twitter yesterday about the first two challenges. But literally, whenever you have malt loaf, it is only that company that make malt loaf, I'm pretty sure. But I quite like it. But I think it's a tricky one because we all have this one idea of what malt loaf looks like. And when Prue and Paul were talking about how it looked and the result of the challenge, I was just sitting there going, well, that looks nothing like a malt loaf. Nothing like it. The one that I get in a packet that's mass produced and is 79p in all available supermarkets. So it looked very different, but they sort of zhuzhed it up a bit here. But you had no idea what it was.
Well, I mean, I'm thinking it's a fruit cake, but when they said malt loaf and it's cake week, I was a bit confused because I was assuming it's going to be some sort of like seeded brown loaf, like a bread. But it's one of those odd things, when people say banana bread, but really they mean like banana cake, but they say bread to make themselves feel better. It's like that. It's just a fruit sort of cake that's in a loaf tin, is I guess where loaf comes from. And then you put butter on it as well. So it's not something I'd buy.
Yeah, it's the malt extract in it, which is, don't get confused and put yeast extract in there. You don't want a Marmite cake. So it's this sort of malty extract that goes in there with treacle and stuff that makes it. But I quite like it. But you're right. I don't think many people under 30, thank you, I'm bringing that down to my age, will know what malt loaf is. So it was quite a tricky one. And of course, I thought, interestingly, the fact they're getting them to make butter, which we've had before on Bake Off, but in the very first signature with our very first exclusively vegan baker, make butter.
That's an interesting point. I didn't really think about that because they said homemade butter, but then it was completely glossed over. I think they just said homemade butter so Paul and Prue had something to wipe onto the malt loaf to eat, because they didn't say, oh, lovely butter, or oh, that was nice. They just kind of ignored the butter and concentrated on the malt loaf.
Yeah, I always forget how easy it is. I mean, don't get me wrong, I don't sit there and make butter, but whenever they say, just put double cream in a KitchenAid until it's butter, basically. Then squeeze it through some cheesecloth. Yeah, it's really easy to make, but I just thought that was really strange. So the first episode with a vegan baker, let's make butter.
I know, that is odd. That is very odd. Maybe she just sort of came in and told them after everything was decided, oh, by the way, I'm vegan now. Sorry about that. Oh, well, then we're going to have to keep the challenges.
Oh, great. Yeah, so we'll have to keep that one. But to be fair, she did really well. And I think that goes in her favour, the fact she did brilliantly in a technical, because those could be the ones that are tricky for her.
Exactly. So did you think that malt loaf itself was a good challenge? Because actually, they all looked pretty similar. So for like the untrained eye, looking at the technical challenge, yes, it was like a brown loaf cake with some caramelized or crystallized rather peel on the top. So the decoration of the peel on the top differed between bakers, but that was the only thing really. And then we were looking out to see whether there was good distribution of the fruit inside, but they just all look quite samey. You kind of want, you know, you kind of want to see, okay, if you had jam tarts, for example, you could see if they were not all the same size, but really it was just a rectangular cake that was brown, and they all pretty much look the same.
Yeah, it was a really tricky one. And you think at the beginning, when they've got 12 bakers to separate, they're going to do something that's going to make that easier. And they were all really close. I mean, you had a couple that messed it up, and, you know, you got some pockets of flour in there, or they didn't quite have the chew, which Paul kept going on about. But I want a technical bake when somebody messes it up. You know, we've got 11 malt loaves and a Swiss roll.
Yes.
You know, I just want something that looks awful or just completely wrong. Whereas this one was quite safe. And I suppose being the first week as well, they pare down the recipes as you go through. So by the final, it's just like, you know, mix the ingredients in the correct order, bake. And that's like the instructions. Whereas, you know, in this episode, I think they basically have the full recipe, just not the timings and the oven thing, which makes me laugh as well, because they always go with the temperature of the oven. Oh yes, just bake it. And they're all running around going, I don't know what temperature to do. Pretty much you bake everything at 180 degrees, I've learned. So I don't know why they freak out too much about that one. But yeah, I think this week's one was quite easy, and you could tell that from the fact you have 12 malt loaves, which even the worst one, I'd still give a go. Yeah,
I'd still eat it. You know, I'm not fussy about cake or what cake I'm eating. But yeah, I think it was Chigs, wasn't it? Who, oh no, they put Amanda last. Even though Chigs had a bit that was kind of raw, Amanda just hadn't mixed her flour in, so you had pockets of flour in there, which, okay, you don't want. But, you know, it was all much of a muchness, really.
Yeah, I thought that was a bit weird. I sort of thought they should have been the other way around because, to be fair, pockets of flour are not very nice. But Chigs had some of those as well. And literally, when Paul cut it open, he just stuck his finger and went, well, that's raw. And it's like, well done. It's like, you know... That's what I want. But again, that was a really bad version. And yeah, one of the corners sort of you could stick your finger into, but it wasn't drastic.
No.
But yeah, Amanda and Chigs towards the bottom. And Giuseppe as well, who's, again, his wasn't that bad. There were just a couple of little bits, I think, of flour in there again, which stopped him from doing that well. But yeah, I thought they all did really, really well.
Yeah, I thought it was okay. And Maggie, she seemed completely thrilled that she got first place in the technical challenge. I think she was having a little cry in the VT afterwards, which was quite sweet. I know.
Prue too got it.
Prue too. What do you think of this whole joke about Prue and Maggie looking similar? Maggie, I wonder from her perspective, she probably likes it because it means she's getting some like airtime on the show, and people are going to remember her. But she's actually significantly younger than Prue. Prue is in her 80s, and Maggie, I think, is 71.
She is, 70.
And so Prue seemed very annoyed. You could tell there was a few like jabs in the ribs to Paul this week, talking about false teeth or something. He is overstepping the boundary with Prue there, but she didn't seem thrilled by those jokes.
She didn't, and I apologise to Dame Prue. She's not a dame yet; she should be.
Yeah.
But you know, you could see that it was getting to her a little bit, and I wonder how much this will go through the series, and if she is going to turn and, you know, pull a wooden spoon on poor Hollywood or something like that and hit somebody fully. But I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was good. When they took Prue's glasses and put them on Maggie, I was like, that's brilliant. Yeah, I think it's just, a little bit of light-hearted fun. But I got the same as you. I was like, oh, she's getting a little bit aggy about this.
Yeah.
This could be interesting. And then she was like, I want to vote Maggie out so that I don't have this anymore. I was like, right, but she was one of the best. But I don't like the joke. Get her out.
Yeah, she made your malt loaf, Prue. No one else knew what a malt loaf was but Maggie. But now you want to vote her out because unfortunately she has the same hair colour as you and possibly talks quite similar. But yeah, I loved it that Prue said she wanted to vote her out. Excellent. Yeah. I love that about Prue.
And you're right, Maggie, I think, would not be out of place upstairs in Downton Abbey as well. I've been watching a lot of Downton Abbey, and literally it's just like, it's very, very rather. And she is double 35 in age, hence why she absolutely aced the malt loaf.
Exactly. 35 is the age where everybody starts getting a hankering for malt loaf, apparently. So the showstoppers are always the best. They're always the most interesting. But this week we had a anti-gravity, gravity-defying showstopper. So all of the bakers, they must have had a lot of time to do this because Amanda said she made her showstopper 4 times. So there was obviously a lot of planning. They all created some ridiculously good gravity-defying bakes. So it sort of seemed like you needed an extra accompaniment to sort of hang over the top of the cake, connected by like a dowel covered with Rice Krispies. Rice Krispies seemed to save the day in this challenge. Everyone was like Rice Krispie time. And and they were all helping sort of keep everything safe. There were some varying skill levels I think you could really see on this. People whose imagination went wild. Giuseppe again, his engineering background came out. His cake looked so professional. And then you saw some other people's like poor Tom who didn't even decide to make anything gravity defying. I know. And you really saw the difference between who was going to be a really good contender in the bake-off and then some people who really need to up their creativity. But did any stand out for you for good or bad reasons?
Tom's, I mean, literally, from that point, it made me laugh because he said right at the very beginning when he was first introduced with Noel, just pull the VT, he went, I'm enjoying my first week. It's great because when I'm voted out in week 1, yada, yada. And then when that happens, you go, oh, come on, like that's a ridiculous mistake to make. You think, is this one of those, literary devices where foreboding we knew he was going to go? Not saying he did, just saying he predicted it. But yeah, literally, whereas the others all looked quite spectacular on the way to the table. Obviously, one of them broke at the gingham altar. His just looked like a wonky cake. It looked like he just had a cake challenge and had messed it up, really, which was a real shame. I thought Giuseppe's Jack and the Beanstalk cake was incredible and looked amazing. Jürgen's one as well, it made me laugh. So he made this beautiful sort of book at the bottom and then this lamp, and when he declared that he had put his spanners through the dishwasher, I was like, well done, Jürgen, taking this seriously, food standards and hygiene. They didn't even try the lamp. So the bit that he'd sat there and painstakingly made with nuts and bolts and nuts in the cake and all that sort of, they didn't even try the lamp cake. They just had a bit of the book, and Paul went, oh, is that made out of cake too? He went, yeah. He went, great, well done. Try the lamp.
Yeah, why didn't they do that? That was a bit odd. Again, what has Paul got against trying Jürgen's cake? Has Paul watched him do something unsanitary in there that he's like, oh, actually, I'm not going to try that one? Did he see him scratch his ear and then mix a sponge or something? Because Paul did not want to try that top lamp, maybe because it had sort of the structure in there, all the plates and everything screwed in. Maybe he didn't want to get the knife in there. But again, he didn't even eat the Black Forest Gâteau mini rolls at the beginning. So what on earth is Paul's problem? We're going to have to see if this continues into next week.
I think we need to tweet Paul.
We do. Okay. We'll tweet him. Yeah.
Did you like any from the cakes for this week? Because they looked brilliant, didn't they?
They all look so good. I think... Amanda's, hers was brilliant looking. It was a wave with dolphins coming out of. She was inspired by a trip to Florida that she went on, and she did a lemon and elderflower sponge. And Prue and Paul said it was beautifully done. I thought it looked amazing. But again, they said that, is it technically a gravity-defying bake? Because the bit that was gravity-defying was those useful Rice Krispies again being the wave. So technically it wasn't the cake that was gravity defying, it was the Rice Krispies. But it looked really good. So I liked hers. Who else have we got? Obviously Giuseppe, he's my favourite if you haven't been able to guess so far. Gesino, I really enjoy the sound of his flavour combinations. I think maybe his execution isn't great. You probably wouldn't buy that one at a store, but he had guava, lime, chili, and he made Swiss rolls for this cake as well, sort of inside. So it was a chili and lime sponge, and I really wanted to try it. It sounded amazing. But they did say that they expected something a little bit different to what he presented, and I think we all did. But I did love the sound of his flavour combinations.
It's that typical thing, isn't it? You get the sort of the flavour versus the look of it, and you think some people just hit the flavour, and you just think it's going to be brilliant, and then you have those that just look fantastic and don't taste very good.
Exactly. Someone who did very well, actually, I was really impressed by their showstopper, was Christelle. She made a whole bouquet of flowers with cinnamon sponged, again with the puffed rice. I hate the phrase puffed rice. I know, are we saying that because they don't want to say Rice Krispies because it's like Hoover and,
I hadn't thought of that, actually. That's a good point.
Puffed rice. But anyway, rice. And so she dedicated her big bouquet of flowers, which did defy gravity because it was huge. She dedicated it to her auntie who did a lot of flower arranging apparently back in the day, and Prue and Paul said it was absolutely beautiful, and the decorations were ridiculously good. They were so good.
They were good, and I think, although, were they individual cakes or were they just icing flowers? I'm trying to remember now.
I definitely remember her doing just icing flowers. There was a shot of her saying that she was just doing all of her icing, but maybe there was individual cakes under there, but
maybe, because there wasn't a huge amount of cake for hers, I thought, but it looked amazing. And she, I think, could be one of those that could be a bit of a dark horse, because with her chai and coconut mini rolls at the beginning and the bouquet, she didn't do too well in the technical. But she's got a good eye for these things and a good imagination. She could be quite good, I reckon.
One of the things that I wanted to bring up is a bit of cynicism, obviously, because we had mini rolls, Cadbury's mini rolls, but we did the, is it Saurine? I always say Serene. You can tell I don't buy it. Saurine, which I was corrected on. My nan's name was Doreen, so it was obviously Saurine.
Saurine malt loaf, yeah.
Saurine, like Doreen. They are, as you say, the only malt loaf brand I have ever heard of, and I have never bought one in my life, and I don't know anyone that does besides you now.
Thank you.
But they advertised in the ad break just after the technical challenge. And so the cynical part of me thinks, did they make some of the technical challenge? Have they made some of the bake-off into branded content? They're ready for sales teams at Channel 4 to be able to sell advertising, for in the ad breaks. Is that why they picked malt loaf, do you think? Or is it because Prue really likes the old-fashioned things and just went with it? Was it a coincidence?
She's never made it in her life before this month. That's a good point. See, I wonder how lost that is on people, though, because I'll be honest, in the last 3-4 series, I've never seen an ad break of Bake Off. So it starts at 8 o'clock. We don't start watching it until a good sort of 8:20, 8:25, so that we can fast forward through the ad breaks. Because it's quite a long, because it's an hour and a half nearly, isn't it?
They've made it longer this year, I swear. It's usually an hour and 15, and now it's an hour and a half. They've got all the ad breaks in there.
All of the product placement ad breaks. But I never see the ad breaks, so I wonder how much that will backfire. And I imagine most people don't either. I mean, again, I tend to sit and pause and fast forward through it, sort of thing. If I didn't, I'd be making myself a cup of tea every break, or get myself a biscuit or a piece of cake, because you just have that inclination while watching Bake Off. So I wonder how many people actually do see the adverts in Bake Off. Probably not many. That's
true, actually, but I think many people don't tend to watch live TV as live now, as you say. People do want to fast forward the ads, because even my boyfriend said, should we wait a minute so we can fast forward the ads? And I was like, oh no, I want to watch it live just in case anything mad happens. And then the first thing we see is Paul Hollywood in a mullet, and I was like, this is why we watch it live. But I do agree, people tend to, if they want to watch a show, don't watch it live. But I think Bake Off, I mean, Bake Off, people watch Strictly. I'm not a Strictly fan, but that's another one. People are watching these shows as live, like everyone used to do back in the day when there wasn't streaming services. It's one of the only shows I think gets watched live. So maybe you're right.
That's
people
true.
with Sky do fast forward, but I think, I imagine it is a lot of money to have your brand in the middle of Bake Off. So they must have data that, well, the TVs are going to be still on in people's houses, whether they're watching it or not, whether they're in the toilet or making a cup of tea or, snacking on their cake at this point. We don't know, but there will be a lot of TVs on. So I imagine that Soreen paid a fair few pennies for their collaboration with Bake Off. And I'm going to be cynical, and I'm going to say that, someone in the production team thought we're going to do Malt Loaf, and then told the Channel 4 sales team so they could get right on Soreen and let them know to do an advertising campaign at the time. I don't think it was coincidence.
No, do you know what? You've brainwave there, because the amount of people who live tweet throughout and are tweeting about it the whole time and are keeping up with the pace of the show. You're right, actually. I think people probably are live. People probably didn't see the advert because they were tweeting during the ad break, but they probably heard it.
Exactly. That's true.
I think you're right to be cynical, though.
Yeah. So the cynical sort of thing does lead me on to asking, how much of the Bake Off do you think, especially now it's become, huge. It's still huge. It's riding the crest of the wave at the moment still. How much of it do you think is planned because it's on TV? So how much do you think the bakers are sort of chosen because their stories or their personalities would be good to be on TV rather than their baking skill? So for example, Chigs, his story is really good because he started baking in lockdown, and that's a good story. They probably went in wanting to find someone who, okay, is a lockdown baker. We're all doing banana bread. Maybe we can have someone on this year that's only been doing it for a year,
Yeah.
So, because again, my boyfriend was like, well, he's only been baking for a year. That seems unfair, but it's a great story, So I think that, and then we had the gravity defying cakes. Come on, we only picked that, so maybe there'd be a TV moment of a cake falling over. So
and we got two of them.
We did. We actually did.
Which was great.
Yeah, we had Amanda's fell over after judging, thank goodness, and Chig sort of was cradling a jug that was the gravity-defying part of his cake as he brought it up to the front. It
just
did
oozed off of the stick. It was lovely.
Yeah, lovely. So, are you as cynical as I am? Do you think that they are really thinking about what would be good on social media? Clips of cakes falling over, and who would make a good story?
Yeah, do you know? I think it's one of those things where. This is reality TV, and we as a nation love reality TV. As a world, let's be honest here, it's become huge. And I think that, of course, we are going to have people that are there because they are great entertainment or they've got a great backstory. You think about Peter last year, he was young, he was really keen at baking, but there could have been 20 of him, but he was the one who was the best fit for TV. When we think about Kim Joy in the past, she was always going to stick out as a character, and she had a different sort of style and influence. And I know a couple of people who've auditioned for Bake Off and for MasterChef, very similar. And, there are so many rounds to it because you... First of all, get sort of the phone call where they'll ask you, they'll have a bit of a chat with you and find out a bit more about you. Then they'll ask you about your sort of baking knowledge and what you might cook in this situation or bake in this situation. But it's also about the story. It really is how they're going to put you on the screen. And I suppose if they can't make a character out of you, which the audience aren't going to like and really want to get behind, then they're probably not going to put you on TV, I suppose, and put you into the series. They want characters in the tent. I think it sort of backfired a little bit last year with Laura, and we were talking about the trolling, earlier on in the podcast. And I think, for Laura last year, she was brilliant. She was a great character, and I think that her story and character helped her get through when people thought that she shouldn't have got through on her baking. But it's more about the sort of the rounded person and the storyline that they go through. Of course, I don't think they fix it, and that's always the big thing that we'll get every year. And I can guarantee by the end of October we'll have people shouting fix because somebody's done something and they don't agree, and we get that every year. But I think they definitely are very... Well, they have casting directors who are going to be very clever about who they put into the tent. Maggie, for example, the sport fanatic retired midwife, she didn't just get in because she likes to play tennis and sounds like she's on Downton. She got that because she looks a bit like Prue, and probably said that in her audition. There's the cynical part of me, but I'm glad that they do that, because if you had the opening introduction VT for somebody who, like me, was sitting at a desk right now, it probably wouldn't make it the most interesting. We think about Jan back in the day in her lab, or Giuseppe this year in his lab. It just gives you an idea of that character straight away and that person. And I think that's one of the things that I love about Bake Off. At the end of today's episode, I felt sorry for the person who was voted out. I felt really happy for the person who was Star Baker, and I knew all of their names by the end of the first episode, because they all had something about them which reminded me. And when they came up on the screen, I mean, they have their little name tags, but you already sort of get that sense of the character. I know the people who I want to win, and I think everybody does. So it's very clever how they put that together.
Yeah, it really is. I think that's a good point. I do think by the end of that first episode, we did know who everyone was. Okay, Jürgen, trombone, German, Black Forest, we know who he is. So Done. You're right. They kind of play on the characters just so everyone can get involved. And it means that people are invested a little bit more. So did you think that Tom was the one to leave, unfortunately? Do you think he was the right person to go?
I'm not 100% sure with this week. And again, I think it's tricky because in the first episode, you've got 12 of them and it could be for anything. I think that when it came to the decision, he didn't do amazingly well in the signature. He was top half in the technical, he was sort of midway in technical. I think it was just that big element of he sort of missed the brief. But it was disappointing in a way. We had Chigs, whose cup sort of oozed off of the stick. He came 11th in the technical, and his signature bake wasn't great at the beginning as well. So I think he could have been a contender for that one. Amanda, obviously, she didn't start amazingly well. Her showstopper was, I thought, great, and I thought actually the anti-gravity convinced me, so I was happy with that one. I suppose probably there was a coin flipped or a straw drawn at the back, because I think it was quite tricky. It was quite close at the bottom this week.
It was difficult. Yeah, the first week I guess is always difficult because they spend the entire episode introducing the bakers to us. Right up until the end of the last minute, they're still telling us what their showstopper is going to be because there's so many people. Tom, I thought Tom was good. Again, he was a great character. He's from Maidstone in Kent. Go Kent, and he runs a model railway business. So, I mean, what a great guy. I wanted to hear more about him. But he shot himself in the foot, really, during the showstopper challenge. He went in sort of a point behind because when the judges were discussing with him, he sort of said, it might not be anti-gravity, it just has a substantial lean to it, So he's already said, look, I haven't followed the brief, which I think is the real reason that Tom was chosen in the end, because he didn't even give the anti-gravity a go. His mini rolls, thinking back, they said they were not much of a mini roll. There wasn't much cherry, bit sort of indifferent about them, really. And then in the technical challenge, I can't really remember where he came, but I guess he didn't really stand out. Fifth. Oh, there we go. In the middle. Still high up there, but, in the middle. But I do think it came down to the fact that he didn't actually give the anti-gravity thing a go. Whereas Amanda, who they said, your cake might not be anti-gravity, it was still high. There was a food element that was still high. But yeah, Tom, I'm sorry to see him go, but he didn't even give the last one a go, really. It was just a leaning cake. It was a wonky cake. It wasn't gravity defying.
It was a wonky cake.
Yeah.
It was just a little bit wonky. No, I agree. I think there's a few that could have been. I felt sorry to see him go, but I wasn't surprised, and neither was he. And he predicted it at the beginning of the show.
He did. Yeah, I know. You should think that people will have learnt by now. Don't say, I think I'm going out in week one, because you are going out in week one. Stop doing it.
Yeah, you jinxed it. Well done.
Yeah. So Jürgen, you have a love of Jürgen, I can tell. He was Star Baker this week. You've already predicted that he's going to be in the final.
I do. So I have a final four, and he's in it.
Okay.
And yeah, no, I think his was really good this week. But again, I think it could have gone for a few of them. Probably the people that I've got in my final four. I think there were four who could have taken it this week. So again, it's one of those ones of, how do they decide who it's going to be? But his his showstopper cake I thought was really, really good. Even if Paul didn't really try half of it. But there you go. I'm not bitter. I think he'll be a good one. He could be one, though, that falls down later on.
Possibly.
I reckon. I think out of the four that I think could go quite far, he's the one that I think could be a little bit hit and miss. I think it was deserved for him this week.
Yeah, I think so. So I'm looking forward to seeing how the bakers get on next week in Biscuit Week, which is always a fun one. They're bringing back interactive biscuit toys. We had biscuit board games a few years ago, and now it's biscuit toys. I saw there's a pool table that's going to get made. They were playing, which already looks brilliant. I can't wait for that. For me, I think that Giuseppe, he's going to be up there in the final. This is my big prediction because last year I predicted from week one randomly somehow that Peter was going to win, and he won.
Yes, so you did.
Am I like sort of the they get like the magic octopus that predicts the World Cup or whatever? Am I like the Bake Off equivalent of that? I hope not. So I'm predicting that Giuseppe, he's going to go very far. Who else do we have? Freya, I think the vegan bakes might be quite hard, so she might trip up sort of further down the line. But so far, she has seemed to make vegan cakes amazing. So easily, yeah. I think she probably could go quite far. Who else have we got? Christelle, I think she could go far because she's got really good flavours and also her designs seem to be good. And Jürgen, there we go. They're my four.
So that's your final four. So mine's very similar. Mine's very similar. I have got Jürgen, Ovs. Freya, I think not only will she compete with Noel in the crazy knitwear department. Yes. It was her that I mentioned earlier on.
Her.
Just them standing next to each other, I was like, Noel, what are you playing at? It's quite normal. It made his outfit look normal this week. I think Giuseppe will be up there as well, and I do think Maggie might make the final four.
Oh, Maggie,
you're right.
yes.
Christelle, I thought Christelle and Maggie, I couldn't work out which one to put up there. I think Christelle, she came 8th in the technical, and I don't know, might struggle at times. But yeah, I think for me, final four, Maggie, Jürgen, Freya and Giuseppe, but I can't call a winner yet.
Love it. Well, we're going to see if that comes true throughout the next 10 weeks. I'm looking forward to doing In the Mix and watching more Bake Off for the next 10 weeks. It's a nice, wholesome, fun time when we get to take the mick out of people who are baking cakes, even though we're not baking them ourselves. So it's a great time. Thanks so much, JP. It's always fun to have you on the podcast. I'll look forward to having you back on next week if you're around.
Oh, always. I'll be back.
Yeah, excellent. Cool. Thank you very much to everyone who's been listening this week. And if you have enjoyed In the Mix and want to keep in touch with us or send us a message or see clips from the show or whatever, you can follow us on Instagram now at BakeOffPod, and we'll be posting on there a lot throughout the Bake Off. So if you like the podcast, subscribe and head over to Instagram.